Do you find yourself maybe feeling lost and confused and most importantly out of control when apps are concerned on a Boox device? Do these expressions maybe ring a bell? Unorganized apps, confusion over which term means what, inability to have a clear mind's view over the entire app section of your device? Well, you're not alone and it's not your fault. The problem lies in the default state, the way apps are organized on a Boox devices, and the default state leaves a lot to be desired. It can easily lead to confusion and feeling overwhelmed, but luckily it does not have to be like that. Apps on a Boox device are a genuine useful tool, and mastering the control over them and management is an essential skill that you should, as a Boox user, implement into your Boox belt of skills in order to actually get the maximum out of a huge potential and super useful wide scope of functionalities that apps can bring to your Boox device. But you can do that only if you understand how to control and organize them properly. So in this video, let me show you how. Alright, so what's the main problem with the apps on the Boox platform, and why this video? Well, the main problem is actually several-fold. The absolute main problem is the inconsistency between devices, because the current state of the Boox OS is such that you can have the same version. Let's say that you have the same version. These are not. This is 3.5.4 and this is 4, but I know from beta that the OS 4 on the Go 10.3 is going to look exactly the same like this, and it's not going to adopt this other type of user interface that the Tab devices and the Note Max and the Palma have, which is a much more standardized Android type of user interface. That inconsistency generally system-wide between different versions of the same OS will translate to how the apps are displayed. So on the non-Tab devices, such as like the Go 10.3, Note Airline, etc., you will have this type of workflow where you have a sidebar, where you have your documents, you have your notes, you have the useless store, you have the storage, and then at the bottom, the way I've arranged it at least, are the apps. So the little cube icon is where your apps are. On the tab-like OS of the Boox system, which is now on the Note Max, Palma, and Tab devices, you will have a much different type of look and something that's far more familiar to standard Android users, where you will have home pages, and on those home pages you will have the ability to organize, add widgets, and amongst other things you will have apps like this. So if I compare it to my Android phone here, you can see that we have widgets, we have apps, we have groups of apps and things like that. So it's a far more standardized type of experience on this version of the Boox OS. So that's the first problem, inconsistency, where you find the apps. The second part is that it's by very nature, the way Android kind of deals with apps and things like that, it just creates like a huge mess. So some form of understanding how to approach the organization and management of apps is absolutely essential. And thankfully, aside from a few, very few differences between these two, even though they look different, when you do just some small settings, you will get them to behave in the exact same way. With one major difference, that the non-Tab OS currently, and to the best of my knowledge, does not support widgets and will not support widgets, where this one does support widgets for third-party apps. Therefore, we're not covering widgets here, we're just covering the app optimizations and settings on these platforms, and mainly I will be focusing on the Go 10.3 because, yeah, it translates kind of well across the different OS versions. So let's start from the beginning. You will notice that there are two different types of icons that are displayed and that your apps are displayed in. Some are going to be like full-on graphics with grayscale, and then you have the others which are simplified icons that are usually not colored and simply outlined or full-on filled black and white type of icons. That is the easiest way for you to start to understand and differentiate between different apps. Some third-party apps will have the same type of design, like ChatGPT and Kindle, for example. But Gallery, Clock, Dictionary, AI Assistant, Boox, Drop, Calculator, Calendar, Memo, Help Center, Music, Naviball, Neo, Browser, Play Store, Pushread, Recorder, Screensaver, all of those are built-in apps. So you have the major differentiation on a Boox device between built-in native apps versus third-party or user-installed apps. Why the differentiation? The first one and the most important difference is that the native or the built-in apps, it is not possible to uninstall them. So if I wanted to do a long press and I go to manage the app, we'll cover that as well, you will see that there is only an option to disable, force stop or open, but I don't have the option to uninstall it like I can, for example, on the Gboard, right from the main menu, or if I go to the management, I have the option to uninstall. The other meaningful difference is that the native or built-in apps cannot be optimized. So the function is not applicable to system apps, and it's across the system. So to recap, the main differences between the native or built-in apps and the user or third-party installed apps: the native or the built-in apps cannot be uninstalled and they cannot be optimized. All right, so obviously it would be a good idea to have an option to organize these apps and maybe group them and manage them. And if you come from any kind of smartphone background, your first instinct would be to long press and to try and relocate it. However, seemingly this doesn't work on this device. Let's go to Notemax and see what the default situation is there like. And here, by default, if I press and hold, I will get the same type of thing, but I will also have the indication of these two little bars on the side, and that means that I'm now in a grab state and I can relocate the app that I have grabbed, like I would on any other normal Android system. But here, if I long press, I cannot get that option. Seemingly, that's locked. Well, not really. That's just the Boox's way of making sure that their customers have a bad time, especially if they are a beginner. All right, so in order to actually get the app arrangement to behave normally, what you need to do is go to the menu bar here, the hamburger menu here, and then you go to sort by. And you will see that we have sort by name, which is by default, then you have by time, and then you have also the option sort manually. So what we actually want is the option sort manually. We go OK, and then we press on one of these, and you can see that we have the exact same type of behavior. So before you even start the organization journey of your apps, this is the very first step that you have to do. You go to your apps, you go to settings, sort by, and turn on sort manually. All right, now that we got that sorted, no pun intended. That was, oh, nice. So now that we got that sorted, we want to deal with app grouping. So how do you create a group? Well, there's two ways of doing it. First one is you press on one of the apps, any of the app that you want, and one of the options that you will see is add to a group. Now, it doesn't matter if you have a group already or not, because when you go to add to a group, you will be in the group menu. So your existing groups will be shown here, and if you don't have them, it will just say no group, but there's no problem because I have option to add a new group. So now I can say, hey, I want to have a group of tools. So apps that I will be using as tools, And you can see there's a group that appeared here. So the second group that I would like to create is something called, that I usually call _unused. And that's basically where I dump all of the garbage apps that I don't use, that are built in, that I cannot uninstall. Because my goal is to declutter this and make it much more easier to have an overview, understanding just at a glance, so that I can create a healthy habit and a muscle memory as I use this. There's no way that you can actually create a muscle memory from something like this, because it's simply a mess. So let's start with the help center. I'm not going to be using that, so it's going to be add to a group. And here I'm going to not add to tools, I'm just going to instead create this new group that I said is going to be named _unused. So these are my unused apps, and that's where I'm going to put the apps that I'm not using. So now I can manually go and select this one, and I can just drag and drop it into a group, right? And then it's going to be added in there. However, there's also another option, because I know that I want to add multiple apps to the same group. There's another way, and you go to the menu here and manage in bulk, and that will just give you the selection option. So now I want to say, like, okay, I want AI assistant, screensaver, gallery, naviball, dictionary, Neo browser, and calendar memo. So those are the apps that I'm not going to be using, and I'm going to add them to a group. There's the option here, and I'm going to add them to the unused group. Boink. And now it's there. Cool. Now let's add some to the tools while we're still in the bulk edit mode. And my tools are going to be the clock, Boox drop, push read, recorder, and the calculator. I think those are all of the tools that I'm going to be using. So I'm just going to add these to the tools. Cool. So now we're already clearing things up, and we're done. And you can incidentally see that you can mass uninstall several apps, but you can't do that on the the system apps or the native apps as before mentioned. But for example, if I wanted to uninstall all of the benchmarks that I have or something like that, normally I go into bulk mode, select them, and go uninstall. But in this case, I'm just going to select Geekbench and I'm go uninstall, and it's just going to uninstall that app for me in the background. So now I am done. Let's move the tools over here just for a little bit of a better overview. And I know that I've mistakenly added Edge, so I'm just going to long press and remove it from the group. And when I return, Edge is placed here. Cool. Now I see that I also have another app that I want to add to the tools. There we go. So I've added that, and also the Gboard as well doesn't have to be here, so it can be added to the tools, not the unused, because I do use it. All right, we're getting somewhere now. So let's do online stuff. So for me, that would be just an online group, and I'm just gonna add another group here. Call it, you can call it, of course, whatever you want, but I'm just gonna call it web. So there we go. And now I'm going to go on mass as well. So we're just gonna manage in bulk, and that's going to be the Gmail, Brave, and it's gonna be for now these two. So I'm just gonna add them to the web. And then I'm gonna create a new group. So I'm just gonna select these guys here. Well, let's first do these for reading. So I'm just gonna add to a group, and hey, I don't have a reading group. Doesn't matter, because I can just go reading. Okay. Okay, cool. We got those there, and I'm gonna be using the Drive Docs, Keep Notes, and Drive Sync. No, not Drive Sync, but just this as, let's say, work, just for simplicity's sake. All right, so now that I am done, I have already cleaned up things a lot. So while doing the grouping, I'm following the mindset of less is more. I'm also making sure that I use clear naming and logical grouping, something that makes perfect sense to me. So I'm not mixing and matching things, and I'm just trying to make it as clean and clear as I possibly can. So now that I've grouped things, the final approach is basically the sorting. And the sorting logic is the same with one added more approach, which is the screen area approach. Because now that I've cleaned things up, I can actually have screen real estate in this view, and I can decide, for example, that the top section of the screen is going to be for my groups or something that I consider folders, and the bottom of the screen is going to be allocated for frequently used apps that I want to have direct access to without going through multiple steps of a folder or a group or something like that. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to move the reading here. I'm going to move the unused group all the way down here, and I'm just going to put the tools around here, and there we go. So these are my groups. Actually, I'm going to move things a little bit because I would like the web to be here, I want the tools to be here, and I want the work to be the first one on a left to right basis. Then I'm going to move the Play Store down in the corner here so that it's completely separate from other apps. And here I'm going to put in the left side these two. And now that I am done with this sorting logic, I have a very clear overview of what's what, what's where. And when you compare to where we started from just a few moments ago, and you compare that mess to something like this, which is clean and organized in a way that you like and that you prefer, well, this is a vastly improved state of a device for you not to get distracted, not to get overwhelmed or anything like that. And furthermore, something that is familiar because you customized it to your own needs and to your own preferences. All right, so now that we've covered the essentials of grouping and sorting, I'm just going to cover a little bit more details about what you can do with managing and optimizing apps so that you have full understanding of how to manage and control your apps on your Boox device. And these functionalities are going to be exactly the same on both OSs, so no need to show it on different ones. It's exactly the same stuff. The only difference was enabling manual sorting here. So first we start with app control manage. So when I long press, you will have the option to manage an app. And when you go to manage app, as previously disclosed, third-party apps, you will be able to uninstall them. Built-in apps, you will have the ability to disable them. That's the only difference. Everything else is going to be the same. This is the area where you have advanced control on a per app basis. And there are several places where you can have this, but this is the most handy one. And the most important things that you need to be aware of is where you can control per app notifications and permissions and have detailed control over your notifications, because elsewhere you may have an option of simply disabling notifications or enabling notifications, right? But here you can see that I have much more granular control over which aspect of the Drive Sync app is going to have notifications. I think that the best example for this would be to go to Gmail and manage. And if I go to notifications here, you will see that not only do I have the option to turn notifications on or off, I have super granular control on a per account basis that is actually linked to this Gmail account. And then I can have super fine control if I do indeed want to have some type of notifications for that app. I have perfect way to control this. The other aspect that should work and is there, but is another fault of the Boox OS environment, is the permissions. And while we have access to it, so you can go to permissions and it should give you the same type of granular control on a per app basis of what type of permissions this app has, for some unknown reason, this keeps on crashing. But once in a blue moon, when, I don't know, something rare happens as well, then you may get the permissions to work, but normally you don't really have access to permissions, which is a huge omission and a huge problem of a Boox platform. The final thing that you should definitely keep in mind is the storage and cache. And this is basically where if you start to have an app misbehave or crash or just behave in a very strange way, the number one troubleshooting thing that you can do is first you can clear cache, and if that doesn't help, then you can clear cache and clear storage and then try to relaunch the app again. Sometimes that helps, but if that doesn't help, you need to uninstall and then reinstall. But the important thing to know is that the uninstall doesn't necessarily remove the app cache and the storage. Some apps do, some apps don't. So it's not a guarantee that you can just uninstall and then install, because if it's a cache or storage related problem, it will remain there even after an install. So in some cases, this is the absolute only way to deal with cache related or storage related issues on a per app basis. All right, now let's deal with the optimizations of the apps. And this is an important aspect of any Boox app that you're going to use, because it's really beneficial to you to understand these tabs and these options so that you can get the best control and that you can get the best results that you can over third-party installed apps on the Boox device. And here are just several starting points of what you can actually pay attention to, what to set for sure, that you can have a good starting point and then build upon and customize further and optimize further based on your needs. One of the most important aspects is in others, you have to make a decision if you need this app to stay active in the background or not. Be aware that any app that is allowed to stay active in the background will naturally increase the power consumption. So you need to make that choice consciously. But generally speaking, if you are using, for example, if you have a work session or something like that, and you would like the apps like Google Drive or Google Docs or something like that to be continually updated and refreshed, even when it's minimized. So let's say you're working on writing some notes and then you go back to a Google document in your Google Drive. Well, you don't really want it to fire up every single time, because that's going to take quite a bit of time and it's going to be distracting. And in that case, I would keep the Google Drive as a stay active in the background type of an option. Similarly, the Drive Sync app here that I'm working on is an application that synchronizes contents of this tablet with my Google Drive and vice versa. And if I wanted to have the ability to auto-synchronize and automatically update as it detects these things, well, then it needs to be active in the background. So those are just two practical examples of when you would want to use that. When I wouldn't want to use that, I wouldn't want to use it on my calculator or Kindle app or something like that, something that's light. The option to remove startup animation is on or should be on by default, and if it's not on, you definitely want to turn it on, because you don't want that thing slowing things down and just hogging the system, because yeah, on an e-ink device, you don't want animations. Then when we get to the color tab, image smoothing is something that I would generally recommend that you turn on for apps that have a potential or frequently display images, because that will get rid of image color banding, and it will introduce color dithering, which is a good thing, so that you have optimal display of color content and image content on your device. The second thing to also keep in mind is the text outline, because third-party apps on an Android system are optimized for LCD and OLED color displays, and sometimes the small differentiation between, I don't know, a yellow background and a white font on it, while it may be fine and visible in an app itself, on an e-ink display those would actually virtually disappear. And this helps by forcing an outline around the text, user interface elements of the text in the app, and therefore it never disappears, because even when it doesn't appear and you can't really see it, you will get to see that outline. So here is a very practical example that works for dark options too. So right here, I know because I'm using my app is where I will have the icons, and right now it should say sync. But right now I don't see anything because it's dark on dark, and therefore it's not displayed at all. However, if I swipe here, go to optimize, and I add a text outline just to 1, it doesn't make a huge difference, but here we go. My icon is now visible because the dark text that was on the dark background is outlined with the contrasting content. Same type of functionality for add text outline, and you can also adjust the background color so that it's darker or brighter depending on what you need. Finally, if we go to the display tab, this is something that I've already talked about in the ChatGPT optimization apps, but here as well, the DPI setting is an important one, and it can actually change completely how an app looks like on your device. So the primary purpose of DPI is if you find that the text is too small on your app. So for example, let's check this. It's fairly small, right? It doesn't really work. So let's increase this, for example, to 450. And you can fiddle around with the slider, but I prefer not to. So instead, I'm going to just type in 450 DPI, and let's now start it up and see how it looks like this time. Much better, much more clearer, much more normal and usable. So this setting will depend on the resolution of your device. So for example, if you're using an older device that has 227 ppi, this value will differ than on the Go 10.3 or on the Note Air 3C, Note Air 4C, for example, where they have 300 ppi of black and white content, or here 300 ppi only content. So this is something that I would advise you to basically start with 100 above the ppi resolution of your screen, and then adjust and test. Allocate time for optimizing your apps and figuring things out. And if you don't do it in a rush, you are far more likely to get a good result and a more thoughtful option so that you can enjoy using them on a daily basis. Now we get to one of the most misunderstood and one of the biggest blunders of default Boox OS settings, and that is app freezing. It is not properly explained anywhere as far as Boox is understood, and as we've already covered, we have already the option to allow the app to be active in the background or not. So what is the main difference between freezing an app and disabling it from running in background? Freezing is absolute. When you freeze an app, that means that the app is basically off limits to Android until you unfreeze it. So you have to manually run it. The system is behaving as if the app does not exist, and no system processes are allowed to remotely start the app should it become needed. Needless to say, no push notifications, nothing. It's just completely off, basically off limits to the system itself until you manually tell it to be something else. Okay? When you disable the background activity of an app, that is a much softer type of restriction, because when an app is not allowed background activity, it still behaves completely normally when it's in use or when it's focused, but it is discouraged by the system from doing things in the background, and it's deprioritized as well, which optimizes battery use and all that kind of stuff. But still, it does allow for push notifications to come through if the push services are enabled and are there, and also it does allow for the system to trigger the app and wake it up and focus it, bring it to focus, and things like that. So it's a very, very different type of state of mind. Frozen app, off limits. app that's not running in the background is in a suspended state, but it is accessible to the system. All right, so now that we know the differentiation between frozen and an app that doesn't run in the background, what's the blunder that I was talking about? Well, the biggest blunder is that by default, any third-party app that has freezing settings is going to be set to be frozen. And that is going to ruin pretty much all of the functionalities that you may expect from an app like that. And another thing that's a really, really frustrating bug regarding the freeze thing is that by default, if you access an app or the contextual menu for an app that's not in a group, you have freeze control, but as soon as it's in a group, you no longer have freeze control. So, for example, you may think like, oh, well, there's no freeze control on these apps. Well, that's not true. Here's Google Drive in a group, no freeze, right? If I remove it from the group, go back here, long press, here's the freeze. And the app has been frozen. And that's just really, really annoying, like properly annoying, because you've done all of your work to organize everything the way you want to, and now you just have to like, okay, but this caveat, catch 22 with freezing, what the hell do I do now? Well, don't despair, because in a traditional Boox convoluted way, there is an under the hood kind of thing, and it's this one right here. So if you press here, that's your freeze control. And here, you don't have to bug around with manually long pressing and things like that. You can just go through the whole list of apps, and you can actually decide which apps I want to be frozen, which apps I don't want to be frozen. And also, this is where you have this awful option, which is automatically freeze after installing an app. That's on by default, and that's what causes these things. So if you don't want that to happen, you definitely want to check this to kind of be off. And you also want to turn the freeze badge on so that you know at a glance which app is frozen and which app is not, so that you can identify and troubleshoot what may be the problem. So here, for example, Kindle, I don't care about it. These guys, yep, I want them there. No Edge, no. The Gmail thing, I actually want it to be frozen because I want to manually check it. Kobo Books can be frozen. Super Display, definitely not. And Keep Notes, I don't want them frozen. So if I go back here, now I can see not frozen, not frozen. And if I go into reading, it's showing the little icon here that it is frozen and optimized. Another option where you can also check the freezing option here is in the app management. So in the menu, and then you go to the app management, and you can see here app freeze. So this option here, if you go there, it actually just gets you to the same shortcut from the main menu, and this icon here will tell you to freeze everything just as a shortcut for something like that. Another really important aspect of optimizing apps is the refresh mode or the e-ink center. And the way that works is that basically when you are in an app of any kind, so let's say in this case my browser, and I go to the e-ink center, the settings that I change here while the app is active are automatically going to be stored as app-specific refresh mode settings. So that means that I can set the refresh mode, the light color filters, the optimizations, all of these things, everything that you see here, I can set it to work specifically on a per app basis. And when it's set, when I switch from an app to an app, the system will automatically apply these settings. And now when I go back home, and I check my e-ink center, it's switched to normal, and let's just for clarity's sake, differentiation, this is my settings for home. And if I go back now into Edge, it's going to apply the settings, and you can see that it applied the refresh settings. And you can change these settings, as I said, on a per app basis. The workflow is super simple. You open up the app that you want and you set your settings, and that's it. That's all there is to it. You can also check this again in the app management. If you go to settings and app management, you have the, along with the other stuff that we've already mentioned. So you have the DPI settings, the app freeze, the refresh mode settings. So that's basically where we are for this part. But you also have additional things that you definitely need to be aware of. So debug mode, we're not going to be covering here, but you have the general access to your app info and to understand like which are the apps that are installed, and you can actually just tap on them and get to the app information here and access them more directly. This is especially useful for system apps that are not visible here. For example, Android system web view. Yeah, so you can disable force stop, you can manage storage and cache, so you can manage apps from the all apps section. So in the app management. Work profile is something that we're going to be dealing with in a separate video because I think that it warrants it. Then you have also general location settings, also something that I've mentioned before. So in the app settings and app management, you have location settings. Then something really useful for advanced users is the auto start settings, and here you can choose which apps will be allowed to start up on the system start. So I may want to have a certain type of synchronization app that starts up along with the system, for example drive sync. I may want it to be always active as soon as my system starts, and that way I don't have to worry about the synchronization. Is it synchronizing or not? The system is optimized to actually do the tasks that I need it to, and this especially becomes more important, as I said, for more advanced users with more advanced use case scenarios. Refresh mode settings, as mentioned before, you have on a per app basis, and you have a good overview here of what these settings were done for the, on a per app basis. We have DPI settings, again, with a good overview here. And I can also choose to go and set all to the specific PPI or DPI, and that's a very handy shortcut. And you can do the same thing, I think, in the refresh mode. Yes, in the refresh mode, you can do the same thing as well. So very handy shortcuts to be aware of. App freeze, we've already talked about that. Then we also have a very useful option of network control, and by default all of the options are going to be all of the apps are going to have access to network, but here you can also have a specific set of controls if you so choose, that certain apps do not have access to the network, so that they are effectively offline. Force to follow system orientation is something that I wish was a different thing, that it worked properly, because even though all of these are now set to off, if you start rotating, I don't know, Kindle, Drive Sync or anything like that, or for example Kobo, it will flip around and be forced to follow the system orientation anyway, despite this being turned off, which would have been a much nicer feature, for example, for reading apps. If Kobo, for example, if I just read and I move sideways or something like that, and I don't have to go to system and turn off rotation or check in the Kobo orientation stuff, it would have been nicer if this option worked like it should, or it indicates that it should, but it doesn't. You also have the scrolling button settings, clipboard reminder, which is very useful, and I recommend that you leave that on so that you know when an app is copying content from the clipboard or adding to the clipboard or pasting from the clipboard. You can also use the add obtain optimization configuration if an app has auto optimization settings available, and you can display the optimized badge, same like you can display the freeze badge, right? Automatically fill in empty spaces, that's for the arrangement of the apps. I recommend that you turn that off if you want manual arrangement like what we've had before. And then finally we have reset the optimization tutorial. That's the onboarding user interface guide that you have when you first start it up, and you have reset app optimization configuration for everything. And finally, I would just like to share one more tip with you, which is if you go to settings and then system display, and this is only for the non tab related OS systems, in the custom home screen section here, you have the option to say, like, when you trigger the home function, which tab will it go to? Will it go to library, notes, store, storage, or apps? And if you find yourself that you prefer to be in apps, for example, I prefer to be in apps, I set my home screen to be the apps. And that means depending on where you are in what you're doing, when you actually swipe to go home and you trigger the home functionality, it will go down to the apps. And then this is something that you may want to treat as your home screen, something that's far more familiar. So what are the main benefits of app control and organization as I've shown it here throughout this video? Well, there's 4 of them. And number 1 is understanding of apps and the functionality and the ability to have granular control on a per app basis to set it up exactly the way you want to, as much as possible or as much as the system allows it. Second is system optimization, because you can have direct control over which apps are frozen, which will be allowed to run in the background, what notifications will be pushed or not, and all of that kind of stuff. And that goes hand in hand with battery consumption, because you're optimizing your overall system to work and benefit your workflows. So you get the nice balance of both battery optimization and functionality, only how much you need or want it. And final one is the efficiency, because when we go from a cluttered, just completely unmanageable overview of apps to something like this, something that's far more organized, where not only do you have folder-like groupings of apps that are logical, but you also have the screen division where you have, okay, these are my groups, these are my regularly accessed apps, or maybe this corner can be for this corner for that, center for something else. It really depends. You can organize it any way you want, but the bottom line is that you organize it so that you are familiar with this and that you're comfortable with this, and that way you increase efficiency many times over on a frequent day-to-day basis.
Well, there you go. I hope that you found the video informative and or useful. If you did, please like and subscribe and ding the notification bell in the description below to get notified when new videos come out on mydeepguide. And also do let me know if there are any additional or what types of stuff you would like to see on mydeepguide, especially relating to the Boox platform. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, and see you in the next video. Bye.